Hey everybody, welcome to ModelPalooza. I'm here with my friends here on this great panel. What is sure to be as we say in the title, a spicy conversation of a variety of different topics. None of us have been prepared. We don't know where this is going to go. Might have to tap into my inner Maury Povich to make sure we keep things civil, but it should be a good time. Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Belanger, and I am the product evangelist at SqlDBM, and happy to be the MC referee of this event. Let's kind of go around and meet our panel. We'll start with you, Veronika.
Oh, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Good friends. There's not going to be drama. It's all kind of like fun and polite. Maybe, I don't know, maybe like Family Feud. Um, Veronica, I've been working with data in data forever and ever and ever for a long time. And currently I oversee data at Saks.
Great. Over to you, Serge. A little bit of background on yourself.
Okay. I'm glad Veronica said we're all going to be friends because I heard Maury Povich. I thought we were about to find out who's the real daddy of data modeling. Glad it's not me. I am Serge. I'm the product success lead at SqlDBM and Snowflake data hero.
Great. And over to you, Chris.
I'm Chris Tabb from the mean data streets. Been data modeling longer than I'd like to admit. Yeah, excited to be here and chatting about one of my favorite subjects, data modeling. So thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Great. And last, our late arriving data panel person, Jay. Welcome.
Thank you, Keith. Hi, everyone. My name is Jay Palmer. I'm a senior architect in Snowflake Professional Services, and I love the wonderful world of modeling, especially if you attended the Big Data London event, where I best way to describe it is I said a statement which divided the audience very significantly. Which was
Partitioned them.
really fun. Yes, I did. But it was good fun. I'm looking forward to this session, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions.
Yeah, what we're all very well aware of in our passions with data modeling. There are a variety of opinions, perspectives on things, but what's always great when people have lots of passion. So, as I said, there's been nothing scripted. I'm going to start the party with a topic, but please, everybody, jump in, give your 2 cents and perspectives. If anybody out there does have any questions for the panel, you can put it in the chat, and hopefully we'll get a chance to add it in. But Chris, I'm going to start with you. You've been kind of like a global traveler, you know, experiencing many different perspectives of data, different companies. Let's go with the ding dong, the data modeling, which is dead. Is it dead? I like get your perspective on data modeling. Is it dead? Is it dying? Where is it in the modern data practice?
I think it's definitely alive. I think it's being given breath of fresh air of some new life into it. I think when we started talking about the modern data stack probably a few years ago, everyone was saying, "Oh, the modern data stack's dead because it doesn't have data modeling." And I'm thinking, hold on, look, it's not the modern data stack's fault. You forgot to put a data model on it. I think with the community talking about it a lot more, the things that we're doing here, these shows, and the rants that we all do on LinkedIn about it, I think it's definitely got raised the profile. I think without well modeled data, you're not going to have the competitive advantage, which is something I always like to refer to. Good models, good answers. Without them, we're going backwards.
Yeah, I know for myself, I've seen over probably the last decade or so, that when big data and the Hadoop came around and NoSQL databases came around, it was an opportunity for many to say, I don't need you to create my data structures anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And we had that whole cycle of things going on. And I think there was also a correlation to data quality issues, right? Duplicate data issues, Cartesian issues, and on and on and on about what they brought to the table. And to your point, I think it having to be revived. People are, like you said, a breath of fresh air from my perspective, which is great, having that plan. So I personally do agree as well that it's kind of almost more important now as ever, to do data modeling within your organization.
So can I jump in here?
Go for it.
Before we start, I think it's important that we at least try to agree on the definition of data modeling, and also wanted to for those people joining us and seeing that there's maybe a missing member. So we had our late arriving fact before the call, that was Jai, but we also have a deleted record. So let's not forget to spill some beer on the curb for homeboy Joe Reese. Had a last minute commitment that couldn't be here with us tonight. So sorry to everyone who came here.
Just for Joe.
Expecting, solely for Joe, but I hope we're enough for you.
The numbers of
anyway,
nope, they're still holding still, so the numbers are good.
Fantastic. But anyway, does anybody want to take a stab at data modeling? Because I think that there's, we throw it around because obviously it's kind of in our wheelhouse and ambit, but a lot of people just have this misconception that data modeling is these arcane diagrams and symbols or extra work at a project deliverable. So what is data modeling to if anybody wants to take it?
I'll take a crack. Let's put it this way. So you don't start off with a data model, right? So you always start off with something different. So if you look at the modeling world today, right, most organizations, there's two ways of building things: top down, bottom up. And when you work on the bottom up approach, people are just building models ad hoc, not looking at strategically. But when you start looking at it from a top down approach, right, from an organization level and an enterprise level as well, what you start building is different types of models, not just a data model. So to the point, you maybe start off with information reference model, which defines your business and the goals and bits and pieces that are associated with that. Then you might have a conceptual model about how your business works and how it gets put together. And that then leads in to a logical model, which then brings all the business entities together, right? And that provides context and additional metadata about the objects which are already being put together. And so then finally, what you end up having is, from the logical, you have your physical data model, which most people call the data model in question. Actually, it's probably a mixture between the logical and the physical model on where it stands. But generally speaking, it's once you go down through that top-down process, right, you've got all this additional metadata that's available to you as well, right, which doesn't exist directly in the data model. And a nice interesting concept here is if I had to tell you, if we look at a specific type of data model today, which has been used extensively, which is the Kimball model, right? You know that you have different types of facts and dimensions and so on. So if you look at the fact side of things and you look at your dimensions, if you look at a type 2 dimension, a data model won't exactly tell you if it's a type 2 dimension unless there's metadata associated with it to say this is. Now, where does that get stored? Right? It's not physically tied to your physical data model unless there's metadata associated with it. So back to the original point, I think if you look at it from a concept, is what data modeling is all about, is that process of driving all those those entry points from top down approach to define those metadata. And that's from the top down approach. If you're looking at it from the bottom up approach perspective, what do you have? You only pretty much have context for the individual use case in question, and you're not really thinking about the bigger picture. So if someone told me what data modeling is today, I think actually it's actually, if you want to think strategically, you need to think about the entire organization as a whole, how it gets put together, and build it that way. And there are particular data models today that actually support that type of thing. And one of those is like a data vault model itself, and it's really tied to business and how it gets put together. So in a long way, pretty much that's what it comes down to, what I think data modeling is.
All right,
Yeah.
let's get controversial. I love so you just throw like a bunch of stuff at people, and they're like, did people just drop off? Like, holy moly, you just gave us two simple things. That's how I think about it. Like the reality is, like, I think part of it, why, like, first of all, why are data people so evil and want to kill everybody? Like, we keep trying to kill things and patterns and approaches all the time. Two big things, right? Like, NJ, I think this is the top down and bottom up. The logical, so conceptual, the one that reflects your business and relationship between business entities. It's still a diagram. By the way, diagrams are amazing. I would say draw a diagram, draw those boxes. Don't get hung up on 50 different types of boxes and 30 different shades of green. And then there's physical implementation of that model. Whatever that may be, Data Vault, I love Data Vault. I'm Data Vault certified practitioner, and I don't generally give certification, so that should say something. Dimensional, whatever, activity schema. But like, it's really not that complicated. It's not hard. Don't get scared by it. Just focus on two things, but always start from the top down. If you don't understand your business, all you'll ever do is reproduce your source system. Like, and that's your bottom up approach. And we all know that none of the applications are perfect and all of them have gaps and miss data and don't have all the relationships. So to add a little bit of controversy, I don't know if anybody agrees or disagrees. I
No,
probably just got
I mean,
kicked out of
I
all the rule schools and stuff.
I agree. I mean, I think one of the most important aspects, and this is just based on my experience over the years, is I came from a top-down approach. I mean, I came many, many years ago from the business side and learned how to model before I learned how to write DDL or physically do things in a database. But to me, that exercise tells the business story. You know, I've seen technology change over the years. We've gone from, God, when I started, it was a mainframe system. And then, we went to relational databases, and then we went to NoSQL, and we went to Hadoop, and all of these physical different implementations of data. But what has always held true from day one for me are those fundamental logical and, concepts from the top down, that this business has a customer, and that customer can have one of many orders, and that order can have one of many products, and a product can be that you can go in front of your leadership as an organization with that diagram, right? As you're saying, and sit there and say, is this still your business? How we eventually make our way to physically implementing that, right? Customer can be in a CRM system, and this can go be in a third party point of sale system, but that conceptual model, that top down approach, that definition of the business should hold true through the evolution with minimal change as your business grows. The physical permutation will definitely change as you modernize or do different things. So, I think that's one of the most important aspects of data modeling from my perspective.
Okay, I'm glad somebody used the B word. The business, I think it has to start there. It has to start with the business. And there's a comment from James Reeves. I'm going to read it. Taking data from its natural form to an evolved form that can be used to answer questions that the business is asking. I think a lot of why modeling has gotten a bad rap, sort of, and maybe has been dismissed in some cases completely, whether for rightly or wrongly, and with intended or unintended consequences, is because we, as an industry, may have gotten like too far into the weeds of the technical, of logical conceptual. Business doesn't know what logical conceptual is. They want to make sure that what you're building reflects their reality. And one of the things people kind of overlook, because again, now you're talking about simplifications, that to what degree do you simplify? Because ideally your data model should reflect your business model. But is that really the case, in the sense of, let's say you have you're modeling like a sale or a contract. You can conceptually show or just illustrate very simply to the business user, like, look, is this what a contract should represent? Does it have these attributes? Does it have this relationship to a customer? And the business may say yes or no, or you're missing this or that. But at the end of the day, it's not even really the reality of the business. For example, if you look at a contract in your database, it'll show you the date it was signed, the customer name, etc. But is it showing you the reality of, this is the negotiation tactic that the salesperson used? These are the little promises they made and hope to deliver on this contract, or this is the kickback that they took for the deal, accepted the lunch, etc. So it's not really reality, but it's a communication toolkit to agree that what we're capturing in the data space is good enough for us to analyze the business, make decisions, make predictions. And the more we tend to drift away into the semantics, which again are important, the less we're able to focus on what we're actually, who our point of contact is as the data team, which is the business. We're not in front of the customers necessarily.
think there's two things that we normally seem to gravitate to because we're all data practitioners, and we always think about the analysis part. We always think about where we're building these data warehouses or data lakes, data marts. But the data's journey starts much earlier than that, and that needs to be modeled in the right way as well. And I do agree that the data warehouse or your data marts need to reflect the overall business. There's going to be pockets of it in your OLTPs that need to satisfy different requirements. At that point, it's capturing all the information at the right granularity that later on it can be analysed. And I'm not going to go straight into the details of the week, but big mistakes we made with just modeling at OLTP, which means you can never get the analysis or get the information out you ever wanted to. And a good example of that is time zones or modeling it with the correct granularity, because if you don't get it in the right structure in the first place, you're never going to be able to get the analysis out of it. So I think that was the one thing. And I think the other thing you just mentioned there, Serge, which triggered it, I love that semantics. I'm not talking about semantics in the semantic layer, is we can never agree on just the words sometimes in this industry. So, and then when it gets to the stage where we're trying to get people to go and build a data model, they seem to add more people to it. It slows things down, to add friction to getting that delivery. So people try and circle. People don't like friction. They'll go around it, and that's where maybe the approach of being too rigid or saying you have to do it this way, you have to use this naming convention, allow a bit of flexibility. I think I did a post the other day. We can't even agree what the difference between knowledge, information, and data in the industry. So when we get down to naming conventions or defining entities, it can be a very slow task, and it's not because of the effort in doing it; it's because of getting us all to agree. So I don't know how we solve all those problems. Maybe doing these shows and having these conversations will help break down these barriers.
Well, I guess you just opened up two
I know. I have
important
two
points
questions
there.
actually. One, I'll ask you, Serge, first. So how do you describe that, like we talk to a business user and we represent what we understand and they adjust. How do we add those nuances? Do we because it's important, right? And I've been in situations where we missed an important relationship, and how do you just continue conversation? You continue iterate?
Yeah, what would be great, I think, is if we had some kind of visual framework to be able to describe an entity and a relationship between multiple entities that's simple, that anyone can read, and allows us to, as you said, iterate and build up on it. Oh, wait, I'm talking about conceptual modeling. So,
So do you just add do you work through scenarios, and do you some of these
yeah.
nuances are maybe details, right? Implementation details, and that's okay. But some of them are important. How do you ensure that you kind of that high level model truly reflects business processes?
Okay. Maybe, I don't know if we can get a show of hands of the audience, maybe not, but maybe we can do this just on the panelists. Again, everyone definitely proficient in every iteration and type of modeling. How many of you have put a simple to understand data model in front of the business users who are giving you the requirements and worked through them before building it? Show of hands. Okay, 1.5, or was that
Yeah.
Keith? Two and a half.
My hand was over here.
It's
Yes.
it depends. Jay's sitting on his hands.
Okay.
My right is my
there's
left.
there's a reason for that, because with business users, they don't really care about data models themselves. It's about business processes, right? And it's not about showing them what a data model looks like. If you understand their business well enough, you can build a model that represents it without it. And the thing is, you remember that in the architecture space, there's something called a viewpoint, right? Different people from business stakeholders will have different views of how the business processes work. So therefore, when you build an enterprise data model, then the views are all consolidated into multiple different facets into one view. But if you're just talking about one business stakeholder and says, this is how my organization runs, they're going to say, yeah, this part works, but I don't understand what the rest of this is. And that involves more. all you need to remember is that from a modeling perspective, business users is all about business processes. How you convey them down the line, that's a different story. And there's a thing that we can probably get into later on, which is about data products and how those aligns with domains and businesses and so on. But realistically, that's why I would generally never go down the path of showing a business user a data model because it just doesn't work for them.
I don't know if I would agree with that. And I think some of that has to be with how you build your relationship with the business. I was very successful over my career with doing conceptual modeling with my business stakeholders, whether that be the CEO of the company or a person on in the process. But it took me building that relationship with them and understanding how to communicate. So it wasn't like a one-time thing. It is very important. If you're a data architect or leading a data program, you can't avoid, you best not be avoiding building that relationship with the business from senior leadership to maybe the person's typing in the keyboard and grabbing all that information so that you can build out that model, right? And even to Veronika, that point you were asking Serge is, you know, I know sometimes we don't use the word taxonomies and stuff like that, but really getting into that hierarchical detail and using that as a communication with your business stakeholders. So it was something I personally ingrained in my relationship with my business was we communicate by looking at these diagrams. Now, obviously, I can't just give it to them and they can understand it. I have to educate them. But over the years, from my perspective, they gained that knowledge and experience to interpret what I was telling them. Again, it wasn't physical. It wasn't talking like, here's, Varchar, this or that. It was just when we say a product, what is a product, right? Are the same people, two different domains calling product two different things, right? In working your way through it. I used to host what I would call stump the chump sessions, me being the chump, and people loved the conversation. And I would have people in a room from different areas, and we would talk these things out. And it isn't a one-time exercise. It is an ongoing, constant exercise of making sure your data and your business interpretation, to your point, they do and care about processes, but I have to interpret those processes appropriately.
Yeah, I think once again, Keith has tapped into the viewer sentiment as well. So there's multiple comments. Jeff Jacobs. We've got somebody agreeing with Jai, but we'll get there in just a second, Jay. And I think you need to standardize on a process. You need to keep that process as simple as possible. But as simple as it is, you still need a little bit of training for the business that you're going to be working with, but you need to cultivate that relationship. So now I'm curious, who on earth would agree with Jay and why? Okay, let's read this.
Is it your friend? Did you hire somebody?
Yeah.
Is that why Joe didn't join? He just wanted to be on the sidelines agreeing.
Yeah, Harvey Joe Hall. So maybe it is Joe under a pseudonym. Okay, I agree with Jay. Business users don't generally care depending on how the business is moving. They want someone to translate the business need into the result. Keith is right too. Okay, so he's pointing out kudos.
On the fence.
Issue is the tech folks will get delegated to the people that sound like them. If it's business oriented discussion, abstracting to the high level view, okay, but not the details. So
I think what we all want to get is the requirements. Right? How we get them is it by drawing on a whiteboard the relationships and then talking it through. When you say customer, do you mean customer or vendor, or do you mean is it party? Right, and that's a relationship. Is that a one to many? Can you get many of these? And it helps. Well, make the business reevaluate what they're asking for, and also it helps you get an understanding of the terminology and how you can actually physically store that data to solve those problems. So I think I could agree with everyone. Whatever works for whatever.
Well, it depends, is what you're trying to say. Yeah. That it really depends.
True consultant, it depends.
Yes, it depends.
You pay for me, and I'll give you a different answer. But it's how you get to the end game is understanding what the business needs, and then how you can actually solve that with a data model.
I mean, I think it's speaking common language. Like we can't draw diagrams in isolations. We have to understand, we have to bring our business users on the ride with us. They have to understand data. I mean, this is the world we live in. We can't just be like, oh, you tell me, I'll interpret it the way I understood it, and then I'm just going to walk away with a bunch of complicated diagrams, right? Like you have to cross the bridge from both sides. And it's hard. Like, I think that's why people try to kill it many times, because if it's hard, it's not worth doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say a quick one. So yeah, we do need to bring the business along, and I think one of the areas that which they really do provide a lot of value into the modeling piece is the business definitions. Right? It's a massive thing, right? Because every organization has different levels of business definitions. And in my past, I was working with telcos, and in those telcos, the definition of an active customer was very different from one telco to another, even within the same brand of telco. So therefore, when you start working with models, you need to actually understand what those definitions are to correctly and interpret what the meanings of those are. There's a wider scope in terms of the metadata around it and so on. But realistically, if someone asks you what makes a model valuable in that fashion, as long as it's had the business definitions included as part of that process, then that makes it valuable in that process, because you know what you're getting. So that's one thing to add.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I see myself oftentimes as, a guide, to help the business through that journey and understanding when they have that. This isn't a one-time exercise that I sit with you because we're delivering a project, right? It's an ongoing, everyday journey, so that you don't become that bottleneck. It's a constant refreshing is going on. I see, I think it's Chris put in here, business users don't know what they need or want, and they want building something. Well, then they will ask for adjustments. And to me, that's where the tour guide part comes into play, right? Is I'm going to ask you questions. We're going to have a conversation. Tell me about your business. And then I'm going to help interpret that and keep that going. To your point of common definitions, I can remember, it was with insurance. It's like we have a customer, but the salespeople, the customer was the policyholder. In the billing department, the customer was the one paying the bill, right? In the claims area, the customer was the claimant, the one who was in the accident. So in reality, you didn't have customer, you had policyholder, you had bill payer, and that journey, that conversation had to occur with that interaction. Sit there and say, we're not going to have a definition of customer. We're going to have these definitions that fit the business needs.
Well,
I think our users really do know what they need and want. Like, don't say that. We might not understand it exactly, or maybe we have to help guide them to ask the question in a way that it can be easily answered. But why do we exist? Why do data teams exist? We don't exist just to build stuff for the sake of building it, right? Like, we actually, and Chris, I know is probably going to have like a 10-minute conversation. We have to deliver business value, and it's our business who's telling us what they need and want. So maybe we need to add a translator in between to kind of like interpret it correctly and deliver in a way that we don't have to constantly modify things. But like it's I don't know. I don't know if we're supposed to disagree with the audience, but I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that statement.
Veronika is 100% right, and she has picked up, I think, on the biggest sticking point and counterintuitive point of why this is so difficult, of this idea that the business doesn't know what it wants. How does the business not know what it wants? It knows the business. It is the business. It knows it better than we do. The problem is, I think, that the business isn't armed with the same, I'm going to use the word semantics again, the same language, whether visual or verbal, to precisely describe exactly what they want. And they use these terms of, I need to see customers' orders. They make many, but they don't know what many is. Must they make an order? Like, again, Jeff was saying he would make sure that people use the right words like must and may contain, can have, many. And this is kind of the minimum bar that they need to clear of. This is the relationship that we need to cultivate in terms of get them speaking the same language. And as a data team, you'll learn a lot about what it is you should be building, I think.
I like the term data guide, but I use data Sherpa sometimes as well, guiding on that journey. But I think there's a when we say that I think as data practitioners, I think we're there to show the art of the possible. And I think that when they say the business know what they want, they know what they want, but they may not know how other things that could be achieved. And I think that's something that, it's our responsibility to listen. They're going to understand the business processes. They're going to understand how it operates, relationships between customer and claims, or whatever the business relationships between the entities. They're going to help with that. They may not know, if I combine this with this bit of machine learning or this here, I can actually optimize your onboarding process and I can do it this way. And I think their requirement is, I want to be able to improve my onboarding process. They may not know how exactly, and I think that's our role to say these are the things that could be done if this data is available.
Like asking the right question, right? They show up with a solution, do this, and they're like, wait, what is the problem you're trying to solve, or what is the insight you're trying to gain? Let me help you solve it. And by the way, I'm also going to solve 20 other things.
Exactly.
Because we see slightly different picture of the same apple pie, right?
Exactly.
Ultimately, we'll want to eat it.
And I think the other thing that I triggered earlier on, which was, why is this so hard? And why have we always been seen as the block of the data modeling team? And I think it's the re-engineering effort, because once something's done, it's done, and it's normally another project or technical debt to go and change it. So everyone's very reluctant. They want to get it as accurate as possible, get as much in there. And I think we don't do that iterative approach as good as we could, I think. And I think that's probably because the complexity and toolings like SqlDBM will obviously simplify that. But having something that helps that collaboration, helps with the management of it, and also helps with a data ops approach, talk about data products, being able to make these changes, and the fact that, okay, I'm not it's not stuck in time. I can make these changes because the effort to re-engineer it is not that much. So I think that's probably, well, in my view, I think that's been one of the reasons why data modeling seems to take too much time, because I don't think we release often enough new models, new features, new attributes,
or defining loads of naming standards that they can't agree on.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. But I think I was just going to get to a point which Veronika mentioned previously, is it comes down to what the business want and what they need. And in terms of everything they're looking for from a model perspective, realistically, unless you're in their shoes and understand what they're going through and the pain points they have, it's very difficult to say what they actually need. And that's because, and I know someone in this role specifically, in the business translator role, right? And they do literally, they're in their shoes all the time, understanding it, but they have they have both a very functional view and a very technical view, which overlaps those two boundaries. And when that happens, right, what business stakeholder tells you that this is what they want, it's not about what they need, right? And what can support them. It's like the unknown unknowns in that fashion, right? So what ends up happening is when these business translators come on board, they really understand the business, what could really help them, and then drive the next capabilities that need to be delivered from a platform perspective, from a model or whatever else that's required to help them facilitate that process. And I've heard firsthand that business owners pretty much go, that would be really helpful. I didn't really think of that way. And those are the things you really need to help drive value within your organization, especially in terms of where you start modeling.
So data product managers, basically, I think, is what you're describing.
So I would say no. A data product manager understands their data domain really well from a data product perspective, right? So, but the thing is, some of the business problems that organizations have, from at least from a business side of things, might go across multiple different data products or domains in that scenario. And if it does have that, then not one domain or one product manager would be able to support that in a single entity.
I guess where I'm coming from, so we can't hire 20 more people, right? So how do we cross that bridge? My thing, kind of like, to take a step back, data modeling is not trivial. It's not simple. We have to talk to each other and people that might speak slightly different language. How do we do it without going, to a boss and saying, I need to hire 20 more people. Is there like here are the simple 5 steps you take and you'll be in a much better place. Sure, perfection, like the North Star is there, and Jane, everything you're describing, all this various, specified roles in layers of doing things truly the right way, or perhaps in the large, massive enterprise organizations. But for smaller ones, how do we, in like, I know you guys, like, you're more on the consulting side and you probably see the worst case scenarios. Like, how do you walk a medium to small size company or team or group to get them on the right path, on that yellow brick road?
Data community, and everyone, and I think we do tend to like try and invent new roles sometimes for these things. And being around this industry for quite a while, you didn't have to have a data engineer, a DevOps, a data ops. It was normally 2-man team that ended up creating a whole pipeline. But I think then we knew exactly what we need to achieve. So it wasn't the role; we were talking about the activity, the tasks that are needed. And I think what Jay highlighted is there's a task or an activity that's needed, which is helping that translator, translating business to technical requirements. What a business analyst used to do. So I think it's a characteristic rather than actually a whole new role.
Right.
It may become a whole new role in a very large organization because there's enough work for them just to focus on it. But we've forgotten about the business analyst skills and writing requirements in a way that can be easily understood. I think that's the role, or that's the activity that's missing. That I'm going to agree that is needed with Jay. I'll disagree with you later.
On exactly the right spot of that small to medium transition, which is exactly where you outscale your own ability to just walk down the hall or ask the guy next to you, and may not even have the experience in-house to know that a reckoning is coming and you better get ready for it. So experience is the best teacher, but you can learn from other people's experience. That's the hack. You don't have to go through the pain yourself. And that's where that's the critical point where a lot of bad practice can calcify into this is how we do it. Unless there's somebody in-house to say, whoa, adult in the room. This you can't take this forward and expect to be business as usual in a year from now. And unfortunately, if you don't see that coming, then you don't see that coming. And that tsunami is going to hit you, whether you like it or not.
Having been the senior data person for a pretty large organization and having, over like 20 different squads and domains, I also found my job to kind of be a mentor to the data team in that data community, as well as in terms of how to play in that role and coach those analysts or other people like that to be able to wear that type of hat. I couldn't be everywhere, right? So you have to grow that experience and that skill set, who are working with the business product owners and the different domains of people. And I think somebody brought up data mesh here, but the real push, there's a lot of push right now in terms of going to decentralized teams. So decentralized teams at the same time doesn't mean, having for lack of better words, a shit show, right? How do we keep making sure the enterprise, what you've been doing with that conceptual model and how those different domains and areas within the organization are still making sure that puzzle can come back together. So as we do decentralized teams, how do we continue to make sure across the board we're still, doing what's right for the business, making sure those teams are able to do what they need to do. And you're going to have skill set differences across those different domains. So, it is a challenge, right? To making sure that we're decentralized, but at the same time, we need to make sure that the big picture is still being understood.
Yeah. Can we try to tackle the next, or the elephant in the room in this case, of now that we've got the business side and modeling more or less squared away? AI, ML, it's coming, it's here.
Never heard of it.
And I think everybody on this call has lived through the big data era and saw the hype, the crash. And again, the same. At least that's what I'm seeing. I'm going to give my little biased opinion. I'm seeing the same themes of technology. Technology is here. Technology is going to solve it. Back then we had the V's, the velocity, the volume, the everything, variety. Now we have AI will solve it. AI will talk to the business. And actually here, I'm curious on Jai's opinion. And you're actually on the cutting edge of this. You're probably seeing the use cases as they materialize.
That's right.
What is the sentiment, and how big of an importance does data quality and I guess data modeling, which goes along with it, which is a big part of it? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so in terms of quality, quality is king. Pretty much everyone is, at least for a lot of my customers right now, are pretty much saying that we need good quality data. We need to be able to make sure that everything being piped into the model is accurate, it's doing well, and it's best of breed for us to get the right output. Now, the output could be different things. From a model perspective, that could just be a predictive model. It could be a Gen AI type of capability. But realistically, if you look at it from one particular angle, which is just how modeling works, quality is king, right? And most customers right now are just turning around and says, how can I leverage a lot of these models for my next evolution of AI solutions? Now, if you look at the context here for Gen AI and chatbots and so on, the most difficult thing actually is use cases, right? So they agree totally that, like, we need good quality, but trying to find the right use cases for them is very difficult. But how you model that data to support those capabilities, once you get around to knowing what the use cases are, it's actually quite interesting, because there isn't one model that can be used for this scenario. It could just be a flat table. It could be a fact and dimension, right? It could be anything along those lines. Now, depending on what your viewpoint is on which models are best for those type of use cases, right? I have my own view, which I'm not going to talk about right now, but generally speaking, what would happen is it's trying to find what works for your organization first. So knowing the questions that need to be asked and knowing that your model supports those questions you need to be asked. But there's obviously models out there that you can ask questions with, like AI solutions, that will actually generate you answers to questions which were unknown at that time. So
Okay.
off the back of that, what we see is that we're seeing more and more customers leveraging it for unknown questions to get those answers to supplement what they currently know today.
Okay. Let me ask a naive question then, because you just said could be a one big table, could be a star schema. The previous understanding was more data is always better, to train a data set, to even analyze existing ad hoc queries.
Mm-hmm.
How naive would it be to say, let's say we're not working with completely raw data. Let's say we at least have a staging layer. You've stripped away the faulty characters, you've given default values, but you haven't established any relationships. You've just have a bunch of tables. Can you train an AI model on that? Or do you need to provide some kind of context, denormalize it, or give it some kind of hint as to how customer is related to sale and which things are not related to each other at all?
So the answer is, in the true data modeling world, the relationships make it really handy from a SQL optimizer perspective, right? If you're just using database positioning, and those work really well for the optimizer to know what those are. But in the next realm world of Gen AI, those are actually quite inferred as part of the process on how valuable each data element or data product, or depending on what your definitions are, is defined. And so they can find characteristics in your data and manage those based on business names and business philosophies independently. And it's what we call them embeddings in the AI world, but pretty much what it is about knowing similarities in data set. And they actually can figure these out themselves. But I think where you were going with your question is, does it help? Yes, it does. Those referential integrities, those constraints, those relationships make a massive difference in terms of what the model is doing and how it's positioning to someone that's a human being. So yes, I agree. From a human perspective, you need to know those things. But as we move down the machine world, right, they can be automatically inferred based on different characteristics.
So see, this is all about modeling. We could go down the AI ML path for a while, and with a data model, you can put quality, or actually make sure that the data that is captured is going to have a higher level of quality. And and we've talked about the logical, the conceptual. So when it gets down to physical, there's if capturing the or understand the requirements or the characteristics of that data can mean that you can actually model that data to ensure that you're not going to get null values, or your values are going to be of have a certain relationship, or we talk about primary key and foreign key, maybe not in where it's not in force, but when it's in force, it's guaranteed that the data is as expected. We use the term shift left a lot for quality. How can we help, or how can we change people's approach for data modeling to always think about the quality aspect rather than just the relationships it has between them?
Good question,
Jay, you're on mute.
I was going to say, who's responsible for data quality is my first question. Right?
Not me.
And the thing is, who knows? I wouldn't say the model, but who knows the business use case for that model? Is probably a better way to describe it. The best to verify what data quality really is about, because I think from a quality perspective, there's pretty much minimum two levels. There's the technical quality on what it is, but the next thing is the business or business rules applied on top of that model itself define what the quality is. And thirdly, is I would say it's another half, which is the observability pieces that sit on top of that as well. So in terms of data quality, right, it becomes a quite interesting context, because if you look at the grand scheme of things, every engineer is responsible for their technical rules. Then who's defined for the business rules? Who's responsible for those? And generally speaking, it's a team. It's responsibility for data quality, right? And as each team is delivering this, it generally revolves pretty much maybe three people on average to build them. One, the BA, or the business person in your team.
Mm-hmm.
Two, your data model, and finally is your engineer, right? All working together to define what those qualities are. I mean, there's another question about, then those are the metrics that you define yourself as. But then what other metrics are there that you need to build a part of your data model? Is it, how do I know how trustworthy it is, right? Does that come under the same metrics? So I think, to your point, I think quality-wise, you need to define all three things to really define what a good data model is, or what type of information is required. And if something fails, where do they fail, and which checkpoint do they fail? Those are things to be aware of.
I think that's absolutely spot on and completely wrong for the same reason, because I think it's just wishful thinking. When it's everyone's responsibility, it's no one's responsibility. And as James was saying, data producer first, and that's the obvious answer. Of course, upstream as possible, the data should be as correct as possible. But where's the incentive? Where's the carrot and the stick? Well, in this case, really the stick. This is what people deserve when they produce bad data. I'm talking about, again, the same. It's so repetitive now. It's trite that you have the source system producing shitty data. You go back to them. You say fix it. They say we're busy. They say we're making ROI. This is not important. We're still making sales. You say it's affecting our reports. They say, okay, fix your reports. Shouldn't there be somebody up top holding the stick?
I think Jim just put in there, public shaming. Let's create a dashboard for the worst offending data quality issue.
Use
Well,
the tools we do have.
You can do that. You can say the upstream team are responsible for that, right? So let me go back to the original point in time to value. If you wait around for them to do it, what kind of value would you produce for your business? Right. So
But there's only certain things you can do retrospective. So you can, and I think this is the other problem is we do take that, the data teams go, oh, okay, I'll put a business rule in there because I know what they need is what they're meant to have done. All right, do that. Oh, now there's the next one. Oh, it's in so the OLTP team or the operational team, they always deal with it. Don't have to worry about it. I think that naming and shaming, and I think that has to come from the top. The CEO said, I want quality data. If anyone puts any rubbish in my system, I want to know why they've done it and how long it's going to take to rectify it. And I think that's accountability. And accountability, it's the stick and carrot thing, is they don't get the bonus. So if unless they do these things, or it's there's other, the department doesn't get the budget that they wanted for their new shiny system that they're going to get. It's ways of encouraging people to do the right thing.
It is, but for some of the operational systems to actually give you good quality data, you need a really good MDM solution that everyone then uses.
Yep.
Right. If you don't have that, you've got free text. How are you going to fix that? Right.
And I'm going to put my data architect back hat on too. And we're talking a lot about modeling and stuff in terms of data warehousing and analytics. But what happened to the data architecture and data modeling for operational systems? And I've seen over the years that, that has also been lost on that perspective. And again, a lot can be controlled and handled if you have those proper data structures and things that you're doing with those data structures from an architecture perspective. So we really do get caught up in data architecture and data modeling for our analytics, but data architecture is a part of your operational systems too. And it seems like we've kind of, I don't say, even abandoned that far more from a data modeling perspective than we have on the analytics side. And that to me has I used to be the data architect for a transactional system, and my rules were far stricter than they were on the warehousing side in terms of how I made my design. So I think there's things that we can do technically, again, from a data perspective to help control that. I mean, obviously I can't make sure that the valid values that maybe a system is putting in is not a free-form text field, but those are things to me, I think, again, as data architects, and from a data modeling perspective, can be reintroduced upstream. And that could also help it as well. But then what people do with that data is it goes from that layer all the way through between Cartesian joins and other things like that. By the time it gets to the end, next thing you know, it's been, messed up all over again.
Chris mentioned it earlier, right? That was one of the questions. So database in transactional systems, right, or source systems is modeled to support software capabilities or application capabilities. It is not modeled to support downstream analytics. What is the incentive for them to incorporate that, right? Like, this is kind of like one of the things I wanted to mention, like, how do you explain to them, oh, can you grab this field as well? Can you, like, let's dump everything to NoSQL. I mean, we were killing DBAs 10 years ago. Why not? And then, oh, by the way, we can't extract that data, just times out for analytics, right? Like, what is the incentive? Because software teams develop capabilities work. What's the incentive?
I think I don't know the answer. I don't know the problems that I had to solve it, but I think something that I have seeing that was going the right direction is the DevOps and data ops world just becoming closer and closer together. And I think the benefits of that is the operational teams will see the consequences of what they do and feel it firsthand, because they're seeing the downstream implications. Before, when it was just a different department going to go extracting it with an ETL tool, no one even knew you're not going to break anything because there was a separation. In this world of streaming, real-time replication and stuff like that, you're going to break things unless you and the data is now such a big, crucial part of the business now. It is used for operational decisions, whereas before it was okay. Let's run the financial reports of last week. It was very much looking back in time rather than being used for any operational optimization. So I'm hoping that the more we go down that route, that there'll be a better common understanding between. It'll just be called ops eventually. Hopefully, there won't be data or dev. It'll be one happy team. Well, maybe.
I have a question around AI ML. Do you see a world where Gen AI creates models for us and we don't need anybody? Like we don't need a human.
I think it'll give us the 80. I reckon, and I've seen that it could do a damn good job of getting you to 80, 90% of the way and then refine it a little bit. So I don't think it'll ever take over completely. Well, I hope not. Otherwise, we'll have no jobs. But I think it can definitely help us work smarter and accelerate. I think we keep using the time to value velocity. And we get caught up in semantics too much of naming stuff. And let's probably delegate some of that to some AI and let it give us what they think the best approach is and start with that.
But wouldn't that be like bottom-up modeling? Because what data would it base? Would you just say it's better at inferring business rules and processes than humans are?
So, for example, there's a lot of context knowing what industry you're doing, and for example,
like common data models, just pulling that in.
Yeah,
which is another probably hot topic. Do you believe in common data models or not? But maybe for another time.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I think with that business context of what you're trying to achieve and the products lines that you've got, you could define a top down approach for a model that then could be physicalized how it's needed later. But I don't think it's never. Companies will never have any competitive advantage if everyone actually has exactly the same data model. So there's always going to have to be some differences and optimizations made to stay ahead. But I think it is that it's to be optimization,
like data model co-pilot sort of thing.
Yes, yeah. And probably is that being built now at the moment, Serge? You creating that? Is that on the backlog?
Can't share the backlog just yet, but maybe
Anna normally does. I see her posts. She should be on there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. We'll provide a human to sit alongside the ML model and just correct it and say, regardless of what you say, we can't launch the product because that day is a holiday, and the model will say, that's correct. Overall, I think this is a bad day to launch a product, even though I just said otherwise. But it's all percentage based and probability based. You can ask it, what is the expected ROI on something, and just depending on the path that it travels, it'll give you two different numbers. So I really see there's obviously use case already where AI is making a huge difference in the development cycle and in people's lives. Analytics, predictability, that remains to be seen, especially when, maybe in predictions, we kind of, that's why they're called predictions, because they're non-specific or within a bound range of certainty. But a lot of times we want certainty. We want to know, how many products by this category were sold yesterday compared to the same day last year. And I'm just very doubtful that AI will get there without a very static type of data model to guide it.
Yeah.
But
with
that,
one
thing just before we finish.
Go ahead. We'll end with your final statement.
Good. Veronika mentioned, would Gen AI build the data model for us, right? And the answer pretty much is no. That's not the purpose of Gen AI. It's for people to ask questions and get responses back for, right? That could mean data. It could be a diagram. It could be a chart. It could be anything, right? The purpose is that you're enabling users to use natural language to gain answers to something technically used to be very technical or very interactive with a data model. Nowadays, we might not even need a data model to support it, especially with the current data models I use right now. So to say that's the future, no. It's about potentially removing a layer in our data modeling approach, right, to enable us to use Gen AI. That could be one facet to it. So we just don't know. But I think on that case, I think I'll hand it back to Keith.
Well, this was great. I think most of us know we could probably go all day long with a beverage and keep on talking about all kinds of things data. And this was great, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And hopefully we can all do it again, and maybe we'll all meet up at a future conference and we can continue the conversation. But thanks everybody, and I think we will have this as also be on LinkedIn if people want to add more comments and keep the conversation going. But thanks everybody.